So first thing to say here, this is my standard Azure portal. I'm a regular user of Azure. I've got no special permissions. So everything I do today is going to be something that you could either follow along with or that you should be able to see in your Azure portal as well. So starting off then, deploying a Rail machine from the marketplace, we obviously want to go over here to that Azure Marketplace. And let's search for Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Spelling it correctly, of course. And let's just talk through what we've got here as the options for RHEL on the marketplace. So the first option here, RHEL, just purely RHEL with no additions here, gives me a few different options here on the drop down. I've got the option to deploy all the various versions, the minor versions of RHEL, so RHEL 9.2, 8.4, 8.3, etc., stretching all the way back. And they've got a few versions as well that says RHEL, the latest minor version as well. So the first thing to notice here is these different versions, right? So we support RHEL, technically RHEL 6, but RHEL 6 is, we did support RHEL 6, but that's kind of end of life now. We've got RHEL 7, 8, and 9 in their current life cycle supported on Azure. And most of those minor versions as well. So it's not often the .0 release is supported, but often after that. So actually, with you see here, we actually do support RHEL 9.0, actually 8.0. So actually nowadays, we support those minor releases, those early minor releases as well. But they are LVM partitioning sort of set up on those disks, right? So you see most of these are mentioned as LVM. So there is a difference here between choosing, these different versions. Some of them are LVM. There's also the raw option here as well. So if you prefer to use your OS without LVM setup, then there's the raw option. So just note on that. And all of these,
for those less familiar with LVM, it's a way to it's our logical volume manager, right? So you can be more flexible with the partitions you have on your raw disk.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. And it could be useful, Carl, right? For like if you're wanting to resize partitions and move them around, it's a bit more flexible, right, with LVM compared to just working with raw partitions.
Absolutely, James. Probably would be the standard that a lot of people would use now on
Yeah,
premise. But of course, if you're
exactly.
just going to have one size of virtual machine and you just want the raw disk and you're not going to change it unless you're going to reboot or delete the machine, then I suppose LVM could be a choice for you.
Definitely. And these ones particularly here, so these minor versions are going to stay on those minor versions when you do a system update, right? So if you select here RHEL 8.1 and do a DNF update, a system update, it's going to still stay with the latest packages, but with RHEL 8.1, right? And that can be useful for workloads that maybe not certified for future versions. Maybe necessary if you don't want to change too much on the system, you want to lock to a specific minor version. That's how those images behave by default, right? Whereas the latest minor version, if you do a DNF update, it will jump the latest version of .7 or the latest version of .9. So there's a difference here in how these images behave in terms of their system, their default updates, right? But that's pretty normal. We do support ARM64 on Azure as well, for those of you that got the ARM64 workloads, but these ones over here obviously are x86. There's also the options here for RHEL for SAP. So if you're looking to host SAP HANA or SAP applications on Azure, then those are the images generally you're going to want to be using. So there's the older versions there for RHEL 7.5, and then for the later versions, there's SAP HANA with HA and update services as well. We're going to push a link out, I think, now in the chat or on the webinar tool for the differences between the different SAP versions, as I know that gets a bit complex. There's a knowledge bit article that talks about which SAP version to use in which circumstances, and so we'll send those out as well. And then there's also some older versions of RHEL down there. So you can see for the older versions, we kind of created individual like catalog entries here, right? But the newer versions, it's all just here in the drop down, right? Just one quick note. So if you do search for RHEL on the marketplace, there's a lot of different versions of Linux out there today, but the official ones have got that Red Hat logo, right? And they're published by Red Hat Inc. or Red Hat Limited, depending on who you see in the marketplace. So be sure to choose the ones with the Red Hat logo. So those are the ones that cover with certifications, support, and all the rest of it, right? So let's go through it. Let's go create ourselves a new RHEL 9 machine. And Carl, this might be a good time to hand over to you, as you can talk us through this the creation process, right?
Yes, hopefully I can, James. Absolutely. So, for those less familiar with Azure, we're going to create a virtual machine, and there's a number of steps to go through. One of the first steps you'll see there is the subscription you're going to choose. So, in Azure, we kind of consider the subscription kind of like a billing bucket. So, everything in a subscription you could divide up, but inside a subscription, then you'll have resources, and everything in Azure is a resource. So, a virtual machine, a disk, a hard disk, a web service, all of these are resources, and we can group them in a resource group. So I see that you're selecting a resource group there, James. You can make new
Mm-hmm.
ones as well. And now you're moving on to the details of machines. So the virtual machine name, obviously a difficult thing to do, but well done. You found a good name for it there. And the next choice is where you're going to put this machine. So actually, there's a region, a location where this virtual machine may go into an Azure data center. There are 62 and more than 62 regions around the world. In each region, there are multiple data centers. So the scale of Azure is quite large. You can actually choose a region might be local to you. You might get cheaper machines in different regions and different availabilities for different machines. So there's one close to you there in UK South, I guess, James. And then next is kind of onto the availability options. So you also have a choice that when you deploy a virtual machine in Azure, it can be in a particular availability zone. You can make it highly available across multiple data centers, or particularly put it into individual data centers. So this can be helpful that on a particular region, in a particular Azure site, there might be more than one data center to give you some resiliency in case there are any failures, of course. Hopefully not too many. And naturally, you can disable that if you like. And then we might get on to some of the features around the security. I see there, that, James, that there's three options. Actually, there's a standard level of security, but the default is actually for a trusted virtual machine. So that's when a number of the aspects, for example, from the boot right up to the vendor, are all trusted. You're going to get a trusted pass. So it protects against kind of attacks, maybe from like using an altered kernel or something like that in the operating system. So when you do a trusted boot, you know that some of this is trusted by vendors that you know and love. One level further to that is a particular type of machine. I know it's great out there, James, which is the confidential virtual machine. So this is one deeper because we talk about securing and encrypting the data in transit and at rest. But what about in memory? And that's what these confidential virtual machines do. They will give an extra level of security for processing that's happening inside the virtual memory. And there's a combination of hardware and software capability to do that. And James, correct me if I'm wrong here, but with Red Hat Enterprise Linux version 9, we have that ability now to use those confidential VMs in Azure.
You bet, exactly. So I think it's around 9.2 specifically, and then future releases from there support the new confidential compute type of machines on Azure, right? So this requires, as you say, specialized hardware on Azure, specialized VM type, which we didn't select that type of VM when creating this one so far. But if you select that VM type with the hardware that is confidential compute, RHEL 9.2 and above supports that. So fantastic, because actually I've had a few customer engagements already actually asking specifically for this, right? A lot of customers got concerned about security, right, and sovereign cloud requirements and all the rest of it. So, how can we protect our data from the cloud providers? Confidential compute might be an option for that, right? So, yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Okay.
Nice one. So then you have the image, which thankfully, James, you brought us through and has already been provided. Gen 2 is actually a second generation of Azure. We also like to update and change things as we go. And the generation 2 of the Azure virtual machines provide a lot more security performance. And by default, that's what you'll get there. So just to sort of highlight that. And then the architecture, like you said, James. So there's also ARM systems available, x64, Intel, AMD, NVIDIA. There's lots of choice about the hardware vendors that you're going to run your Linux on.
So
Um,
far, then there's nothing specialized really for Rail, right? I mean, I can see that we go forward and create our SSH key and password and ports, for example, if we wanted to enable direct SSH access, but there's nothing special here for Rail. It's just like deploying any other virtual machine in Azure for the most part, right?
Correct, absolutely. So then you're just getting into the sizing. You're getting into whether you run it as a spot instance, which is the additional capacity in Azure. You can choose a machine at a discount if you want to enable that or not. There's other ways we can talk about how you do that, but by default, then you'll be a particular type of machine you'll use in Azure, a particular size of that machine. Some are really good for general processing, others for high performance computing, for AI, for just compute intensive, memory intensive machines, and different sizes of those as well. And then that's it. You're into the SSH key, into the password, and then you can go into further configuration on the disks and the configuration, the post configuration, the security. So there's lots more details you can do, but by default, I think they would be good basics to start with.
Fantastic stuff. Fantastic. So let's just jump a sec to go look at that pricing, because I noticed we had where we are over here. We got the price per month. The question is going to be from customers. So what our price are we paying on the marketplace, and sort of how does that work? So I'll just push a link out again in the chat or in the webinar tool for the Azure pricing calculator. But I thought we might just quickly walk through this as I know this came up. So first thing to do is select your currency. So I'm going to go with euros. It's probably the most common currency for most folks on the webinar here, but your currency is just down there. And if we just go through here, I'll just select, so let's say UK West. I'll just go for Linux. I'll go for Red Hat. And so this is just a really useful tool if you just want to look at different pricing options available, both for the compute cost, right, and for the software subscription. So one thing just to note, no thanks, no help today. One thing just to note here is the different options available. So see here that for a single VM like we just created, there's the compute size down here. And again, you've got a few different options, right, Carl, for savings plans and reserved instances. Anything to add there?
Yes, just we principally think about paying for your machines in terms of pay as you go. So you're just going to pay the money for the machine for the time you need it. You can reserve the machines, James, as you said, for 1 year, 3 years, and even in some cases 5 years. And you get a discount for doing that. It's kind of for a baseline workload. You're going to leave it on all the time. And then there was the spot machines, which I mentioned before, where there's a substantial discount. And then further, there's these saving plans. So there's a few ways you can buy these virtual machines. And then, James, I think you're going to tell us as well how the Red Hat Enterprise subscriptions will align to that.
Exactly right. Exactly. So as we've seen, there's lots of different machine types here, right? On Azure, the way that rail pricing works is it's small machine and large machine. So small is anything from 1 to 4 vCPUs, and large virtual machine is anything above 4 vCPUs. So it's really, really very simple. There's nothing else that changes that pricing. So from a Red Hat perspective, it's all premium support for the rail part of that. So for the rail software subscription, that's premium support. But I'll just show you what that looks like. So if you've got pay as you go here, obviously we're looking at a 2-core machine. But if we change that to a 4-core machine, you'll notice the Azure cost has stayed the same. So that's a small VM size. But if we go above 4 cores, so up to 8 cores, for example, then you're paying the large price for the VM. So €92 a month on average is pay as you go for a rail machine here, right? And as you go up and up, for example, if we start getting, trying to find some bigger machine types here, so 32 CPUs, again, that price still remains the same, as it's literally just small or large VM. It's really, really simple in terms of the pricing model for rail on Azure. And that can be really flexible, right? Pay as you go, right? Can't we see like spikes in demand, and we see people who are doing like testing, or from your background, HPC, pay as you go might be the right way to go for some workloads. But then again, you've got the 1 year reserved if you're looking to have more of a steady state workload, right? If it's going to kind of run the same for the rest of the year, then obviously there's a discount available for that on average per month. At that point, you're committing for a year, right?
Mm, absolutely, James.
Cool. We didn't yet talk about Azure Hyper Benefits. So that's bring your own subscription, but we're going to come to that later on the webinar. So I don't want to go too far ahead of ourselves. Just thought I'd bring it up as we were looking to create this. So we could have clicked create and go ahead and create that VM, but we don't want to wait a few minutes. So by the magic of a bit of preparation, here is one I created earlier. So if we go to our list of VMs, we'll go look at our webinar VM here, right? So in this case, I know it popped up saying, hey, Azure saying, hey, Sweden Central is actually going to be cheaper for you for running the Azure compute cost. So that's why I've got one of those VMs running in Sweden. And if we go click into this, we can look, you can see that it looks and feels like any other VM on Azure, right? Pretty much everything is identical. I've got the size of that VM, got a public IP address, and all the other bits and pieces remains the same. I will just point out, though, a few differences. So if we scroll all the way to the bottom, I'm not sure how many of you have seen this before. I know a lot of customers who have deployed RHEL on Azure and didn't see it, but there's a link here to the Red Hat customer portal. And this can be useful if you want to get access to that portal. It's not just a hyperlink, it's not just a link to access.redhat.com, but clicking on this link in particular is like kind of a magic link. You see in my little preview down there, it grants me a 30-day subscription on the Red Hat customer portal. So clicking this means if you've got an empty Red Hat account with, let's say, no other subscriptions from Red Hat, if you click on that link, it will ask you to log in and single sign on and all the rest of it, but it gives you that 30-day subscription. And what that means is that then from there, you can access the Red Hat customer portal, you can access our knowledge base, you can access our support teams directly if that's how you want to engage with support. There's also the option to look at the evaluations and updates and other bits and pieces in there as well. But that's how customers who are maybe just using Azure for their Red Hat subscriptions, that's how you can get a Red Hat account or an entitled Red Hat account to view everything on our customer portal, right? So not well known, I think, by a lot of folks, but that's how it gives you access. Obviously, if you've already got Red Hat subscriptions direct, then you already have access to the customer portal anyway. But that magic link there, again, that gives you a 30-day subscription. And I think if you just keep on, like if you get to the end of your 30 days, you click it again, it just reactivates, right? So as long as that VM is running, you've got access to the Red Hat the Red Hat customer portal. Okay. I talked about getting direct support from Red Hat. So again, you can choose to come directly to Red Hat for your support. But of course, there's also the option to use the built-in support from Azure as well, right? So anybody who's ever raised a support ticket on Azure is probably very, very familiar with this. But if you just sit here and type, you can see that there's a knowledge base built into Azure for Linux issues and some Red Hat issues as well. It is different from the Red Hat knowledge base, but you'll see that there's some useful things that pop up. So, for example, if you want to do a root password reset, there's a little guide here that can talk you through how to do that. But should you click on that link and go and create a new support request, again, it looks and behaves exactly like support for anything else on Azure. However, there is this little drop down that says it's a virtual machine running Red Hat. So it means that a support request goes to an integrated support team. That team is staffed by both Red Hat and Microsoft experts. So it's folks that know RHEL on Azure, do this every day with customers, all the time, and so they're going to be familiar with not just Red Hat issues, but issues that may specifically come up when running on Azure. So do check that out. If you're looking to raise a support ticket, don't just select regular VM, but VM running Red Hat means you're going to get routed to that integrated support team. Right? So that's a real benefit.
I think that's really important as well, James. It does illustrate the partnership between Microsoft and Red Hat, the fact that we have integration at various different levels across the company in engineering and sales and marketing, but also in support. And you don't want to get bounced between two different teams when you've got a problem, you want it solved as quickly as possible. So we love the fact that we have this sort of integration together, and hopefully that it will result in tickets getting solved quicker for customers when they need to do it.
That's it. You bet. Fantastic. So let's come out of here then, and let's jump up to the VM again. So let's see if we can connect this VM as we've shown the Azure portal lots, but let's SSH onto the VM. So what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to go spawn my own terminal and connect to it from my desktop. I'm going to connect to it directly from inside Azure. So Carl, what's happening here?
Yes, actually, James, you're probably running through something called as well Azure Defender. So you're getting an Azure CLI, a command line interface directly in your browser. But in order to do that, it's also probably enabling the just-in-time access feature of Microsoft Defender. It's opening the port to the machine at the time that you need it, and then it's giving you direct command line access to that machine. So directly in the browser, no need again as well to go to a different terminal, which of course you can do as well, but this can also be a convenience.
Fantastic stuff. This is great. I mean, I know it's not for everybody using SSH from inside the browser, but the just-in-time security access is really helpful. Right, it saves me having to think to have machines open on port 22 on the public internet. That's never a good idea, right? But it's also just a convenience. This makes things nice. So you can see it's oh,
It's good for the webinar too, James.
yeah, sure is. Sure is. So it's a working VM. If as long as I can type properly, then it's a working console. So that's all good. So let's see. I mean, this is a Rail 9 machine, right? I think it's let's see what version we deployed. Yeah, Rail 9.2. Again, for every intents and purposes, it's just a standard Rail machine, running on running on a cloud provider. There's a what's I guess significant here is this looks and feels like anything else, right? I will just point out some differences though. So in terms of the image differences on Azure, maybe compared to other environments. So the first thing to do is look at. Oh, again, see, I can't type. It's because I'm recording. There you go, fantastic. So look at the agent that's running. So just a little PS there to look at processes running on the machine. See, we're running this WA Linux agent process, right? So this looks like a Python process to me. But this is the agent, right, that's running on Linux VMs on Azure. It's not required, right, but it's kind of recommended. It enables a bunch of interesting functionality, like being able to run additional scripts when the machine starts up. You can add scripts, I know, from the console. And I think that the reset root password functionality, which we searched for earlier, that's enabled right by this Linux agent that's running on the machine. So I know, for example, if we went down here on that machine and go to reset password, that's the agent right running on the machine that allows us to do these sort of things. It's a kind of like providing kind of management functionality, right? So it does a few other bits and pieces, but that agent is open source. It's shipped by Red Hat nowadays as well. So if anyone wants to go and inspect the code or is worried about it, then it's all available there in the open. But that agent, sitting there, not really so much CPU or RAM or anything like that, but is running in the background. So that's something that is a little bit different on Azure. You can go search for all that agent, search for on GitHub. There's a bunch of documentation as well. I think we could also we could send out a little link in the chat as well to what that agent looks like. The other thing that's a little bit different on these machines as well is the updates. So if we look at the Yum repositories, and actually just try running Subscription Manager, for example. Oh, see, it needs to be root. Yep, so if we run Subscription Manager status, it's going to show this machine is unregistered. Now, this is a little bit strange for those of you that have been been using Red Hat for a while. You'll know that you use Scripture Manager to access repositories and get access to RPMs and updates and all the rest of it. But we don't tend to use the Scripture Manager on Azure. So rather than having to set up your own Red Hat account and require passwords and all the rest of it to get access to updates, we use a thing called Ruby, so Red Hat Update Infrastructure. If we have a quick look at this, it's the name's hidden. It's called packages.microsoft.com, but that is running Red Hat Update Infrastructure, and that's a really simple kind of just-in-time access to Red Hat updates. So Microsoft publishes updates for Rail 7, Rail 8, Rail 9, every version that we support, and you don't have to use the Scripture Manager to get access to updates. So if I did DNF install, the greatest web server in the world. See if that works. Yeah, there we go. You'll see that that's going to work without Subscription Manager access, and it's going to provide updates. But I should have access to everything here. So, again, needs to be root. So doing F update. So we keep the machines, the images relatively up to date, right? I didn't have to download 300 packages there to update my machine, right? So we're keeping them update on those minor versions from the base images. But customers do want to install additional packages and updates. One little minor difference is there is using Red Hat infrastructure to get access to those RPMs, right?
Absolutely. And Microsoft maintains those. It's a convenience to customers. It can be used in a number of different ways, but even for those deployments that are completely within Azure, they might be firewalled off. There are certain URLs that are allowed access. It's also convenient inside Azure that these repositories are available and the OS can just update itself like it would normally.
Fantastic stuff. Fantastic. So hopefully everything we've showed you so far has not come as a surprise. Hopefully we've pointed out a few hints and tips and things that maybe you weren't quite familiar with or anything like that.